Now, my guests are seated, and I introduce them to you right away, and we get into the discussion this morning. And this morning, my guests are Abdul Malik Kubako. He is editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. He's a regular panelist, and as always, here with his dossier, loads of documents. And this week, there were some people who reminded him again of the need to put his documents together and remind him of the need to get his memoir so that everybody can benefit. Yeah. Also here in the studio this morning, I am so excited to welcome the Honorable Haruna Idrisu. He's a minority leader and MP Tamale South. Thank you for joining us this morning.
My pleasure, Samson.
Very difficult to track you down this way. Very, very difficult. Okay, here in the studio also, my very good friends, Martin Pebu, the man who says it as it is, and Dr. Justice Yankson. A while ago, we were wondering where he really wants to belong, because he's a practicing medical doctor, and he's also a lawyer. He practices the law too as well. But I was saying a while ago that I see him at Kolibu often than I see him in courts. We sat almost close to each other in class. Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to Newsfile.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, so we begin with the matter of the NCA shutting down the 2 radio stations in Accra, XYZ, and Radio Gold. And the questions that are being raised, including whether or not freedom of the media is under attack under a man thought to be a champion of press freedom, the Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo regime, or that this is just the party, as it were, the government persecuting its political enemies because the 2 radio stations are known to belong or have associations with the opposition NDC. And guess what? The shutdown happened just at the time when the elders of the party had a press conference to castigate the police and state a position on what it will be doing going forward with invitations to attend criminal summons or whatever there is. We'll examine the technical legal matters involved and see what other questions come up. So let's begin by taking a listen and watch this very briefly.
What I can say is that those of us who are committed to a free media will always be concerned when we hear that a radio station has been shut down. This, however, does not mean that there's a license to media houses to flout the law. But if the radio stations have been shut down for reasons of authorization, and it can be demonstrated that there are no other stations who fall in the same bracket but have not been shut down, then I don't think that there's a problem, because we are living, even though there's freedom of expression, we live in a country of rule of law, and all media houses must respect the laws of the country, provided those laws are not unconstitutional.
In my view, these are events that are piquing the political temperature. And so you do not go closing down radio stations when the political temperature is rising. Otherwise, it creates needless tension that we all don't need. I think around this time, governments would have to be encouraged to focus on its, redeeming its promises it made to the people, so that it can have something to talk about during the electioneering campaign. This is not a time to do things that distract government focus and attention from what really matters. Well, if you speak to the radio stations, they tell you that they have never said they wanted to operate without license. And so if that kind of relationship is there, why the surprise and all that? And so those affected should do the needful. They should do the right thing now, and then let's ensure that there is peace. The tension that is brewing is needless.
You're welcome back. So you heard Akoto Ampaw, who is also known to be one of the foremost individuals in this country who have supported press freedom, media freedoms, and continue to defend these rights. And also, you heard Professor Ransford Gyampo of the University of Ghana, Political Science Department, who also has issues with the manner in which the process is going on. I want to begin this morning with Abdul Malik Kwekubako. Right, so I will not pretend to go over what the issues really are. So begin with you. What do you see is what has happened that the NCA has done, and why does it deserve the opposition that it is receiving within some sections of the public?
Well, let me be honest with you. You see, from a very philosophical and even sentimental point of view, I'm instinctively very uncomfortable if and when actions are taken against the media. I'm not saying we are a special breed of people who should be granted perpetual immunity or indemnity of a sort. But I'm very uncomfortable anytime I see steps being taken against the media. This is the general basis on which I want to proceed in articulating my position today. Last year, was it 2017 or 2018? This matter came back. And I think that, again, I expressed the same sentiments here.
Right.
And I actually advocated, and I wasn't alone in that advocacy, for a certain amnesty to be granted those affected media houses or enterprises so that we could start afresh. Subsequent to that, I know some legal actions were taken, things went to court, all sorts of arguments happened, but some sort of amnesty also was granted. So we thought we were on a clean slate and to proceed to do things. The Constitution, yes, protects, actually provides us with the atmosphere to operate fearlessly, vigorously, without any impediments. And this has been an issue on the front lines for a long time. In the case of the radio eye intrusion, if you recall, which actually is the basis for all this plural private broadcasting thing, the matter ended up in court. And if I recollect correctly, the Supreme Court actually, whilst reading, is it Article 162, and showing its fundamental nature, still asked us to read it together with 164, if I'm right.
Yeah.
And so, as we speak, the legal regime shows that the freedoms that we fought for, some of us went to jail for, are not supposed to be absolute.
Okay, so 162,
Yeah.
which the Supreme Court invited us to read together with 164. Here it is. 162.3 says that there shall be no impediments to the establishment of private press or media, and in particular, there shall be no law requiring any person to obtain a license as a prerequisite to the establishment or operation of a newspaper, journal, or other media for mass communication or information, unquote. If you go to the NMC today, you have in excess of 3,000 newspapers, journals, and others that are registered here in Ghana, and magazines in excess of 3,000. In fact, I think they have about 3,078 or so. Then the 164, which the court said we should read this together, which says that the provisions of Article 162 and 163 of this Constitution are subject to laws that are reasonably required in the interest of national security, public order, public morality, and for the purpose of protecting the reputations, rights, and freedoms of other persons.
Yes.
Could you continue?
So our freedoms, which we fought for, clearly as we speak in the face of the law, as determined by the Supreme Court, are not absolute. So what we have to do now is to check if the actions being taken by the NCA are rooted in law. If they are rooted in law, have they been executed or operationalized transparently and not capriciously? We need to determine those things. And that would need a search into the records, the status of all those who have been affected. Last time, I think, was 131 radio stations. Can you remind me, were television stations part of it, or is just the radio stations, or the entities, the media entities? Some operate both radio and TV, so maybe in some cases was both. It's important to do the discussions within the context of the facts of the situation. What is the status in terms of authorization of these entities? In this case, today, fast forward, it is Radio Gold and Radio XYZ we are talking about. I'm told some actions have taken place in the Western region also. I'm not too sure yet.
Yes,
but I think,
that's what we are told.
Yes, but I'm not too sure. But we need to know. You see, right now the discussion is focused on 2 stations. And then I see an interesting description of the 2 stations, pro-NDC, pro-opposition. It's been introduced in. So there's a political twist to it, and that's where people talk of the persecution or possible, discrimination and things.
And the time the action was taken.
Time, when we say time, what do we mean by the timing? Are we talking of when the party NDC was holding a conference?
Yes, the elders were holding a conference, and these stations were said to be carrying them live.
That's for me, it's immaterial.
Okay.
I wouldn't lay too much emphasis on that, to be honest with you. But I can understand those who want to do that. If you want to push a political point, you obviously will include it to your submission. But if we're talking of timing, there's another element of the timing that is even more substantive in terms of perhaps all this talk about the Ghanaian media being under siege and the Ghanaian press ranking having fallen. All those things, they are even more substantive, even though somebody will still insist that they are not material to the decision
because as
taken.
we speak, I think this has been reported by the BBC too.
Yeah, it could influence indirectly the subsequent ranking, because in some of these agencies, they don't go into the details we are going to go in terms of legalities or non-legalities. They don't go in there. They just look at the perception and the feeling of the people and the way we are all talking. The GJ is talking, Media Commission may be talking this, then they put it together and it runs. Okay, it's been so for a long time. I'm not about to sit here and educate them to review their methodology or how the logic with which they do their things. But to be honest with you, we need to look, there's a combination, the media practice and the freedoms we associated with. Some of these media entities are also in business, and there's the legal regime that guides those businesses. It's a very complex mix up of things. So we need to be very careful how we go about it, The media, the NCA, in terms of how they've gone about it, I'm told they went with armed policemen. It depends on the number of policemen who were there. Because if you are going to shut down a station which will require you going in there to do something, if you don't have protection, it could lead to something. The protection for me is for both sides. Those you are shutting down and those who are going to shut down. So, my brother, we will need, as I said, I really would wish that as quickly as possible, they can settle the issue. I'm told, I've been reading some legal documents.
Right.
I'm told that, you see, if your license expires, then really it means you have no authority to operate. And if you go and say, I'm applying for renewal, it's not automatic. It's not even automatic that you will get the same thing. So it's a very serious argument. Fortunately, we have 4 lawyers here, and I'm the only non-lawyer.
No, but what do you think is prudent? Forget about law. If it is possible to forget about law, what do you think is prudent? That if you are running an entity such as a media entity, and you have a license, they call it authorization. I think it was deliberate by the framers of that act, the Electronic Communications Act, to say you need authorization, and not to use the word license.
Exactly.
But to some extent, they use a bit of licenses in there because of the constitutional injunction at the time. So authorization. So what do you think? What is prudent? That when such entities come into being and they have a 5-year within which to go back and do a renewal, should the renewal not be deemed to be a question of automaticity or something like that? That it is deemed that you will come for it and you'll get it anyway.
I would go for that option instinctively, by my nature. That's the kind of option I would go for. I will vote for that any day. It's better. You see, but as you're saying, I shouldn't go for the law. So it means it's not rooted in law. If something is not rooted in law, those who are in charge can occasionally do anything they want to do. So if you asked me, I would even suggest that we should find ways and means of casting that thing in iron of sort, so that we don't give anybody space to manipulate that regime. You see, with all these things we've gone through, we've had verdicts from the Electronic Tribunal, we've had verdicts from the Supreme Court to guide us. You recall the criminal libel agitation, the repeal for the repeal. Supreme Court ruled criminal libel as constitutional. Am I right?
Yes.
They did so in the Tommy Thompson, Kofi Komsin cases. Eventually, we had to go to Parliament to use the legislative machinery to cure that mischief. So here we are. We cannot be discussing these issues outside the context of what judicial pronouncements that have been made by mandated bodies. That's the difficulty. It's a challenge. Because we are supposed to be law-abiding, we are supposed to do this discussion looking at the law and verdicts that have been passed by institutions that have been given the mandate to deal with the issue. But I ask, let's find a way of applying some humanity and common sense. If Radio Gold were to come for renewal, whatever you want to call it, and you were to suggest that the 90.5 frequency was no longer available to it, I would be sad. They've established a brand and a tradition. Everybody knows. It's one station I take serious. I listen to them a lot because I want to know what's going on at the other side, you know, as part of my intelligence and information gathering. You can't do politics without hearing, listening to what others are saying. So I'll be sad, and it will be wrong. So we should do things, apply some humanism, rather.
In respect of your answer to the question of renewal and your reference to also the Electronics Tribunal that sat on some of these matters when the issue came up earlier in 2017.
That's right.
The tribunal, presided over by Justice Samuel Dateba, retired of the Supreme Court, essentially came to the conclusion that these various entities, about 9 of them, there were 9, that the GIBA represented at the tribunal, that the 9 of them were being asked to pay certain fines for the infringement of non-renewal or non-provision of, documents, so to speak. And the court came to the conclusion that because of the tribunal came to the conclusion that because of the non-renewal at certain points and the amounts that were being asked of them, some of them, I think there was one which was 30 million or so, 13 million, and a lot of money. They certainly couldn't pay those monies and still be in business. It said that once they had not renewed, they were not sort of under their regime to be asked to pay penalties.
Meaning they didn't exist.
They didn't, somewhat.
Virtually.
So the penalties imposed on them were quashed.
That's right.
They were not supposed to pay a dime.
Very interesting.
They were supposed to pay a different type of penalty because they said that, look, if it expires, somebody who is used a license without authorization should pay a different penalty. I think that's section 65 or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me just read the conclusion of that decision. That for reasons given in the tribunal's discussion of ground A, the appeal is allowed on ground A in respect of all the appellants bar one, and the penalties imposed on all the appellants with the exception of Network Broadcasting Limited, that's Radio Gold, are hereby quashed. The appeal of Network Broadcasting Company Limited, that's Radio Gold, is allowed on the ground of procedural impropriety, and therefore its penalty is also quashed. So I'm saying entirely this is what happened. The penalties that they were being sought to pay were quashed.
Yeah.
Don't you understand the NCA when it says this is what happened? Therefore, they are required to come for new licenses, meaning you don't exist. Since you don't exist,
in the face
you are
of
not
the law.
supposed to be operating.
Yes.
So I shut you down.
I agree.
You make an application, and then I determine whether I want to give you or not. But my question is, should it be whether I want to give you or not when they apply?
I come there, but in the same judgment, the same ruling,
right.
says, this is on page 12 of the ruling.
Page 12.
It says, in other words, the appellant argues that this provision presupposes that the person who has an obligation to furnish the information requested is the holder of an authorization or a license.
Right.
Therefore, the holder of an expired authorization or license is not subject to the obligation to provide information.
Exactly.
Rather, the correct sanction to apply to a person whose authorization has expired is the sanction for failure to renew and not the sanction for refusal to submit documents requested under authorization, since there is no longer an authorization.
Right.
It's, in face of the law is solid there.
Yeah.
But you see, I'm saying that what we are dealing here with is a combination of law and prudence.
So my question is that, granted this is what the NCA is pursuing, we clearly know this is what they are pursuing.
Yes.
If they say, okay, come back and now apply, should it be a question of exercising yet another discretion to decide whether to give you or not to give you?
I would want them to exercise the discretion in the way of giving back the line authorization and the same frequency to them for good reasons. Okay, but please, let's also talk to those who are managing these outfits. They are doing business as well. And there's a regulatory environment out there that they are aware of. So some of the breaches, some are so deep-rooted, some are protracted over a long period of time. And it's like as if it's some sort of impunity as well. Here we sit, look at me, I'm virtually rationalizing or justifying impunity. Is that not what I'm doing?
Okay.
For sentimental reasons, good reasons, or the prudence.
Okay,
but that's what I'm doing. I'm challenged hugely.
So let me come to Martin quickly, and then from Martin I come to you, Haruna, and there's a reason I'm doing so, because I've seen you reading some of these documents and you're marking over and again. Yes. Where Kweku left off, for example, where it was found that their licenses or their authorizations had expired. Yes. Yes. Because their authorizations were expired, they were not subject to pay penalties. Exactly. As those refusing to, produce documents as was being requested by the NCA at the time.
That's correct. That's correct.
Do you find the NCA is doing anything wrong in what it is doing now?
Oh, definitely. As I have... even as Kweku was talking, from my body language and everything. Yes, you see, I would also start from the philosophical point of view, because you see, the law itself takes inspiration from religion, philosophy, and all that. So as and when you find a law very draconian, you know, natural law, positive law, that kind of orientation, we have a right to resist it. You say, yes, because you know from the natural law perspective, if you have any written law that doesn't seem to accord with the law of nature, such a law should not be valid. It's unfortunate, but looking at it, especially in the context of Radio Gold being such a colossus, so to speak, in our Ghanaian political landscape, you say, you don't play with such a station. I mean, this decision just lacks tact, especially also in the background that if you look at the Reku Brobe case, the Republic, the Independent Media Corporation versus the Republic. It was the president who argued that case.
That's 96.
Yeah, 96, 97 Supreme Court. Yes, and the president was of the view that, look, there is no need to have any license. Of course, the Supreme Court, looking at everything, decided that, no, you need authorization is needed because of public interest, national security, and all that. But that is the president. And also, even if you go back further, you look at the case of Republic versus Mensa Bonsu, that case, the page 28 judgment case, the president was lawyer in it. You see, and once again, he was for freedom of the press. So for now, for the president to now ascend to the throne, so to speak, as president, and yet you have the National Communication Authority doing this, and it's like a slap in the face. Because everybody, even social media,
the president has sworn an oath, right?
Yes.
To uphold the laws of this country.
Yes.
And these are the laws.
Okay. Then
unless you say the laws are being wrongly interpreted, why would you want to blame him?
Oh, but the NCA...
In any case, is the NCA the president?
No, but we all know that they are appointed by the president. The president looms large in the appointment. So, Samson, that apart, since the president enforces the law, do you know something? I've been wondering. So we have Article 36, Clause 5. I wonder if it's being implemented. And let me read. It says, for the purposes of the foregoing clauses of this article, within 2 years after assuming office, the president shall present to Parliament a coordinated program of economic and social development policies, including agricultural and industrial programs at all levels and in all the regions. You see, it says, including agric and industrial programs at all levels and in all the regions. I've been asking myself that, is the president enforcing this law? Is he going by it? Yet, looking at it, it will be absurd that today I get up and say I'm going to the Supreme Court that I want it implemented. Because I understand that our resources are limited. There are other provisions in the Constitution. I look at them, then I say, oh, this one, if you go, everybody would just say, this boy, you're just disturbing. You see, so the context I'm creating is that it's not every law that we implement to the letter. And that's why at this juncture, I think that you should, the Bible...
Yeah, you are referring me to 1 Corinthians 10:23.
Yes, please read it for me.
Okay. So let me read you the Bible quotation that he's asking for. Okay, so I'm looking at several versions, but let me read two to you. The English Standard Version says, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up.
Very good.
So let me read King James. King James says, all things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient.
Good.
All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not.
Good. Yes. So you see it. And there are several other very poignant statements we'll find to show that, look, you can't implement all the laws in a particular fashion. Some of them you have to exercise tact, good judgment. But I find that lacking in this particular case. Not
Stations have defaulted in following basic, legal compliance since 2000.
Yes.
And there's a new regime that wants to clean up the system.
Yes.
Is seeking to enforce the law.
Yes.
And you say we shouldn't.
No, that's not what I'm saying. The NCA itself didn't understand this law. When they went to court, the NCA lost. The NCA itself didn't understand the law. You see, the penalties he came up with, millions of dollars, 34,340,000 Ghana. There's also one, the network, that's the Radio Gold one. Was it 15 million? So this one is Digital Broadcasting Systems Company Limited. So theirs came to 34,340,000. Those were all the things that were quashed. So the tribunal now taught them that, look, for a company whose license has expired, you go under Regulation 65(1) and 11. And let me read. So that's, we're talking about Regulation 65 of LI 1991. Says, 1, a person shall not use a radio frequency without authorization from the authority. Then 11 says, a person who acts in breach of any provision of Regulation 65 to 77 commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding 500 penalty units. I think penalty units, one is still 12.
Yeah, 12 Ghana cedis.
So you see that that's far below the millions, the PPP that they came up with. So it's such a, I mean, it's a joke. So the point is that to the extent that the NCA itself didn't understand this law, it's quite a good pointer to them that they had to hasten slowly. As I said, especially in the context of the timing. I'll come back to the timing and repeat. I just associate with what Uncle Kweku said. The timing, except that I disagree on the point of the fact that he says for him, the fact that they were closed down when NDC was holding the press conference was not material. For me, I find it material. Because don't forget that, you know, we are political animals, so you can't run away from conspiracy theories. And, you know, doing it in that fashion just reinforce the textbook notion of governments looking for certain ways to control the media and especially gag opposition. So the timing was so wrong. So I'm like, what? You live in a country like this, you already know that we have Akoto Ampaw for the issue of whether he should go to the police or not. And it has increased the political temperature, as Professor Gyampo had rightly stated. And then you go to close down the station. To be candid, when I heard of the closure, I panicked. You know me, at least I've been here a number of times. Ordinarily, I'm very optimistic to a fault that, look, this nation will always hold strong. But for the first time, I panicked. So I was in a hurry to go home because I was like, this is crazy. Because already the country was heating up with this Akoto Ampaw matter. So this is where judgment is required. It's not every law. As I've stated, we can have several laws that we will recount here that are not being implemented. But it's for good reason. You look at the economic resources and everything, the political temperature and everything, and then you strike a balance. So this decision to close at that time was grossly disproportional. And see, even in the NCA case, Professor Dateba, yes, the learned Dateba, always erudite. In preface, before he came to the judgment, he said that, look, NCA is guided by the principles of transparency, proportionality, and all that, accountability. And I'm interested in the proportionality one. The decision was grossly disproportional at this time. You see, when you yourself, you went to court, you lost. You didn't know how to implement your law. The court had to teach you. So that meant that for me, that would have been a good opportunity for them to grant an amnesty, and then we start afresh.
The reference that Eba made there, that you refer to, is found in the NCA's Act, and in its objects.
Yeah. Good.
It provides that there's a portion which is headed regulatory and best practice of the authority.
Good.
The authority shall, in the performance of its functions, have regard to A, the principles of transparency, accountability, proportionality, and consistency.
Good.
Best regulatory practice. And finally, the protection of the interest of consumers or users of communications networks or communication services, and in particular, to the interest of consumers' choice, quality of service, and value for money. Good. The interest of both rural and urban dwellers.
Good. Perfect.
So what are you saying?
So you
because of proportionality, look on and allow them to flout.
No, not look on. So as I said,
3 months, or is it to the expiration of your license or your authorization, you are supposed to serve a notice to them that you intend to renew. And then they will take you through the processes to renew it for you.
Yes.
and we have radio stations that had defaulted for getting close to a decade or more.
Good. So the context is that it tells you that something went wrong. So that's why I share in the view that we needed to grant an amnesty and start afresh. Because if what we have is correct, it means that for Radio Gold, the licenses expired in 2000. You sat on your hands from 2000, this is what, 2019. This is the time you see it fit to go and close them down. No. As soon as you do that, it will rather feed into the suspicion that you want to gag opposition. And as Uncle Kweku rightly said, look, we are the poorer for it when we shut down.
What should you do?
Oh,
when the law is clearly being violated, what should you do as a regulator?
So look, they have the discretion to engage. That's why I say you see the objects and what they have is there are so many tools, and you know, even in principles of interpretation, you'll find a set of principles that will lead you to one conclusion, then another that will lead you to a different one. Then you sit back. So like when we're doing constitutional interpretation, you look at the aspiration of the people, the history and all that. Then you say, okay, maybe I should toe this line. You say, so you always have to have a good sense of judgment. Yeah, so you see that in the Rekubrobe's case, the independent corporation case, you see that the Supreme Court looked at American history, the Radio Act of 1912 and then 1927, and they saw that when they gave free rein, so many radio stations went on air and there was chaos. They were interfering with each other's frequencies because they said, oh, no regulation. So if you look in the case, so you see that the Supreme Court was informed by experience from America and other countries. So you see that then they came down and said, well, in that case, we think some regulation is reasonably necessary. Okay. So is that tact that we are asking for? Example, let me add. So what is it that in this case, we've come down hard like this? But you see that when it came to the banking crisis, so we've lost how much? About 11 billion, right? That's how much of the taxpayers' money we've used to clean up. So why can't we use the same? Can't we do something to help the freedom of expression? And so much especially, I think, was it the philosopher Voltaire who said, I may not like you, right? Something, but I'll defend you to death for your right to say what you like, right?
Interesting. Okay, hold it on there. And yes, I said I'll come to Haruna at this point. But it's a bit, but I think it is good that we take time and go over a certain chronology of events as presented by the National Communications Authority. So I'm going to try. It's quite a bit, but we have to. Now, it says this is the chronology of Radio Gold's FM frequency authorization as at 10th May 2019. 1. 3rd October 1995. Network Broadcasting Limited, Radio Gold, the company, was granted authorization to operate a commercial FM station in Accra on the frequency 90.5 megahertz. 1995, 3rd October. 2. 2nd October 2000. The company's authorization expired, but the company did not submit renewal application prior to its expiry. 2000. It didn't do that. Now, 29 September 2008. The NCA wrote to the company reminding them that their authorization had expired and as such, they were operating without a valid authorization. The NCA requested the company to submit a renewal application within 30 days, attaching the guidelines for renewal of FM authorizations as well as NCA application form, they call it something. 4. 28th October 2008. 30-day period granted to the company to apply for renewal of authorization expired, but the company did not submit a renewal application. 25th August 2009, the NCA wrote a final notice to the company referencing the letter of 29th September 2008, as well as a telephone conversation with a director of the company, Mr. Rashid Tanko Amadou, and reminded the company that their authorization had expired. The company was requested to apply for a renewal by 25th September 2009, failing which the frequency will be withdrawn and the company closed down. 25th September, when they were supposed to, the deadline, the 30-day period granted to the company to apply for renewal of authorization expired, but the company did not submit a renewal application. 29th, same year, 2009, the company submitted an incomplete renewal application. The company did not submit audited financial statements for the past 5 years, as well as SNIT and tax clearance certificates. 23rd November 2009, the NCA wrote to the company informing them of the omitted documents required for renewal of the authorization. The company was requested to submit the omitted documents to enable the NCA process their renewal application. Then, from 2009, nothing is heard until June 2016. The NCA wrote to the company referencing the letter of 25th August 2009, informing them of their expired authorization and that their operations are illegal. The company was requested to submit a complete renewal application accordingly. 2016, we moved to 2017, June 23rd. The NCA issued a notice of suspension to the company for its failure to submit a complete set of documents to renew its authorization prior to the expiry. The company was informed that their station will be closed down after 30 days. Then 24th July 2017, the company submitted a letter applying for renewal of authorization. The letter, however, was received, but all other attachments were not received by the NCA. Then, on the 26th of September 2017, the company was fined 31,590,000 as penalty for failure to submit a complete renewal application for a total of blah, blah, blah days. Then, 29th September, again, 2019, their lawyer, 2017, their lawyers wrote for the company to the NCA requesting for a revocation of the penalties imposed on the company since they were unlawful. Then 23rd October 2017, the NCA wrote to the company granting 50% reprieve of the fine that it had approved and was requiring them to pay within, that's 15,700,000 and something, within 30 days. Failing which, the station will be closed down. 14th November 2017, they wrote back an appeal to the NCA to revoke the penalties imposed on the company and requested for a meeting with the NCA to discuss the concerns. 18th November 2017, the NCA acknowledged the letter from the company of the lawyers, blah, blah, blah. Then on the 21st of December 2017, the NCA wrote to the company granting amnesty on the sanctions imposed on them. The company was requested to pay a reduced fine of 3,650,000 for an infraction period of 365 days and daily fine and so on. Then on the 11th of January 2018, a meeting was held between the NCA and the company represented by one person they speak about. The company was informed that the documents they presented at the meeting for renewing their authorization were incomplete, and as such, the NCA could not accept them. Then 12th January 2018, the company submitted a complete renewal application and paid the application fees. The application was, however, not processed due to a case filed by Giba on behalf of the company at the Electronic Communications Tribunal. 18th June 2018, the tribunal gave its ruling in the case. The tribunal quashed the penalties we have referred to, and therefore a fresh applicant requiring, let me just read it, yes, stated that a former holder of a frequency authorization reverts to the same position as a fresh applicant when the authorization expires, and as such, Radio Gold does not have a valid authorization to operate FM radio station. Last two, 8th of May 2019, NCA issued a letter to the company directing them to cease operation since they did not have a valid authorization. And then 9th May, the company was closed down for operating without a valid authorization. You look at these facts and you ask yourself, what can you say in defense?
Samson, it will be very difficult for me to justify what I choose to describe as the regulatory excesses of the regulator of electronic communications in Ghana, the NCA. And radio communication has assumed commanding importance in our country And we should commend all those of you who have contributed to a very fearful media landscape, which is contributing generally to the economic, social, and political development of our country. I was reading a British Times newspaper, I think 18th April, and I was excited to read that Ghana was ranked better than the United Kingdom in terms of press freedom. And this is a UK newspaper, 18th April, the Times newspaper, even though we had slided just a little below what used to be our global positioning. And the headline was, heavy-handed Britain ranked below Ghana and some other countries. Like it or not, in Ghana, we generally have labeled you, the media, as pro-government and for government, like it or not, in both fashions. And therefore, it is not out of place for you to find the like of Radio Gold and XYZ labeled properly or improperly as opposition media. When in government, they will do maybe the voices of the government. And then probably, with respect, maybe city MPs, you may want to label them as pro-government, given the character and tenor. That is not to say that those of you, the actors, don't demonstrate neutrality in the work that you do. Isn't it curious that this closure could only happen when the NDC party elders, led by respected Alhaji Mahama Idrisu, was reading a press conference on a matter which was boiling the political temperature? Only the NCA can answer. And could it be coincidental? That remains a fundamental question that we cannot answer. And the script you've just read from the NCA, I'm challenging them and trust that we have the mandate in Parliament to hold them for further details. We would want the same publication in respect of the 492 radio stations operating in Ghana, and not only Radio Gold. Let them give us a profile of every radio frequency, how it's been operational from 1995 to yesterday. A certain liberal attitude is important, and probably maybe today I should reveal this. You think that it's for nothing that multimedia is leading in terms of digital boxes. Are you the only FM station or electronic space that could take advantage of it? It was a certain liberal tenor to allow you to grow, because you had demonstrated that you were feeling a critical gap in the media landscape. At the time that the country had not even gone digital, we allowed you to go digital. We could insist on the law and say that wait until we have a level playing field. I would name another entity beyond multimedia which also benefited from that liberal attitude, DSTV, the Go TV. So regulation of the media remains fundamentally important, unless we all want to invite chaos into our polity, which is not what any of us will opt for. So we would be challenging, and go back to the lucid judgment as our friend and yourself have referred to, of Justice Datiba, proportionality. If you read Oslo also as minister, and for me, having been Minister for Communication, I endeavored to distinguish between policy as minister and the regulator at NCA. And therefore, the action of the NCA will mark off an attempt at political interference to use the regulator to get at political opponent. That is how it will be read widely, given the coincidence. I've given you two examples. Now, if you go out, only 89 FM stations are not functional as at date. We need to know why. And probably, Samson, Alhaji Malik have raised a fundamental issue, and probably those of you in the media, rather, including Giba, should be pushing for it. Where is the broadcaster bill? Because the mandate, even to regulate and control radio frequency, in my view, should not be the unipolar action and authority of the NCA. It should be one of a marriage between the National Communications Authority and the National Media Commission, which we sought to correct. In fact, at the time that I was leaving the Ministry of Communication, I had signed a bill, broadcaster bill, forwarded it to 2012.
It's a 2010 bill. Or
Yes, and I say in 2012, as Minister for Communication, I forwarded same to the Minister for Information so that we co-sponsor it, which was to define the parameters of public broadcaster, commercial broadcaster, community and radio broadcaster, and to provide for who controls this frequency. Can you imagine today the National Media Commission is helpless?
Do you really sincerely think that that bill will see the light of day when that bill provides that politically exposed persons will not get any license?
No, why?
Politically exposed, the politicians won't get any license to operate a radio station.
You see, when I spoke about the labeling, you've helped it. So even ownership have also contributed to the labeling, depending upon who owns it, even though the players may not sometimes resist the temptation of the owner and play your neutrality. So the action of the NCA is heavy-handed. They should demonstrate proportionality by publishing, because in the earlier instance, we had details of over 131 FM stations which were affected. Why are you closing only 2, Radio Gold and Radio XYZ, which are known, strong advocate, and being critical of the political administration of the ruling government today? That you cannot justify.
When you follow the sequence of events,
and I'm saying the same
you are
sequence,
incorporated to do a radio business, and you get your authorization in 1995. By 2000, every 5 years, by 2000, you are supposed to renew. You don't do. Wait. You sit, and things are allowed to degenerate until the 12th of January 2018. That you submit a complete renewal application and then paid the application's fees. But the NCA is saying the application was, however, not processed due to the case filed by Giba. And Giba filed the case on behalf of 9 companies, including Radio Gold. So the application was, however, not processed due to the case filed by Giba on behalf of the company at the Electronic Communications Tribunal. That's why they didn't process it. You think that is a genuine situation, a genuine answer?
Samson, I'm saying don't zero only to Radio Gold. Which other entities are guilty of these infractions?
This is what we have to deal with now.
Yes, no, don't deal with it. In taking this action, we are saying that you have acted in a manner which is politically targeting. The only way the NCA can explain itself out of it is to demonstrate that they did same to other FM stations which are affected.
Or they are about to do same too.
They must do same.
Or they are about to do same too. Would that be okay?
They should demonstrate. And I'm saying, as I live here, on Parliament's first sitting, I'll file a question demanding all this detail to enrich the jurisprudence of media practice in Ghana.
Okay.
But essentially, apart from the bill that I've spoken about, the broadcaster bill, unannounced closure, the NCA must explain the unannounced closure of those 2 FM stations at a time that a critical matter was being dealt with nationally. And you see, we should not, and Samson, let's be careful, even multimedia, Kweku Ray said, let me just give you, I mean, if the NCA is for want of spectrum, it's just this country. Look, I insisted again in 2012, and you can ask the leadership of Giba, one of them now works at the Tourism Development Authority. What Ghana needs to do is to migrate from analog to a digital platform, and there will be spectrum dividend to benefit the country, part of which you can allocate for radio and for television, and to deal with rural deficit. We're not doing that. So you don't think that even to ask multimedia to reduce its radios, to serve what purpose? Are you in that extended radius? And again, you are talking of law. All the FM stations operating in Ghana, at the time that I was minister, all of you were infringing the radio's provisions of your authorization. Must we close you down because you are infringing it? Go and check. Between 2009 and 2012, all of you exceeded your radius
but the reference
kilometer limit.
But
because
the reference
of the public good and the service to the country, and because you are a source of opinion and dissemination of information, you are encouraged.
Okay.
If you are using it for the bad of the country,
is this not an NCA that is being rather proactive and efficient
Proactive
at exercising its mandate rather than sleeping.
It should be,
because a while ago, Martin was accusing the previous regime or the NCA why it slept and allow the defaulting stations to accrue so much and wake up one day to say pay 30 million. But I'm saying that the reference you just made about asking multimedia to reduce, it's not multimedia, it's to a number of the radio stations, mostly in Accra, that operate 100 kilometers radius, that the NCA is asking they should bring this thing down to 45 kilometers. But we may not be able to talk about that because as we speak, the multimedia, as you know, is in court. City FM, they are all in court challenging that particular decision. Yeah, right. Okay, so, but just hold on briefly for me.
My brother didn't deal with the question you asked.
Okay. Let me find out from Dr. Youngson. I'm coming. Dr. Youngson. When you take the chronology of events,
after this you provide a
you see a lax situation where you are supposed to be punished, but the one to punish you doesn't really want to punish you. So it serves you notice and says, you have an expired, you are running on an expired life. Come to us and do the right thing. You don't seem to be doing it. And it takes you between 2000 and when? Yeah. And January 12th, when you are now submitting your complete documents, and then you are paying, they said the company submitted a complete renewal application and paid the application fees. The application was, however, not processed. So it was in January 12, 2018 that they filed every document. But my question is, once they did that, if the NCA wanted to act in good faith, why didn't he go ahead and process that for them?
Well, Samson, that is a very good question.
Why did you reject it?
Gives an answer that there's a case in court.
Yes.
I'm not justifying, but
not in court. It says Giba had filed at the Electronics Tribunal.
Yes. Yes. So for them, that became, in quotes, the stumbling block or the bar. They wanted to know the outcome.
You are a lawyer.
What I'm saying,
you are a lawyer. You are a lawyer. They were the ones who had the upper hand. Okay? The applicants or the companies, they were sort of inferior. They were at their mercy. Okay? They were at their mercy. They had filed the case through their mother organization. The same have come to apply. Is it not within you to decide I want to accept it?
No.
You don't breach any law if you accept it.
No. You see, they accepted the application pack.
But they didn't process it.
Yes. The reason being that, don't forget that prior to January 2018, from the chronology of events, first they had fined them. Subsequently, there was an amnesty which amended those fines. So what it meant was that you were supposed to even pay those fines for the processes to continue as well.
Okay.
And because the matters were before the tribunal, of course, then these entities were also hoping to get those fines quashed. Ultimately, they succeeded. So once the matters had not been determined at that point, I think it was fair that they did not at least continue to stop them from operating, but held on to the application pending the determination of the case.
I ask you that from your knowledge of the law.
I think that is fair.
And practice.
Yes.
Please, let's take it this way. I have sued you.
Yes.
For doing something wrong.
Yes.
I turn back to come back to you, begging you to do something for me, even though I have sued you. Don't you have the right to decide whether you consider me or not?
Yes, I'm saying that they considered you.
No, they did not.
No, they did because, mind you, prior to going to court, there had been issues with how certain amounts of monies you needed to pay. You had pleaded, they had reduced it through that amnesty of 1 year period for you to pay a certain amount of, penalties based on what you may have done.
Right.
So once you had not paid, and the matters were also now before the tribunal, I think it was just fair that, look, the NCA took a decision that let's hold on, let's finish with all that. But the key thing is that post the determination of the issues, then the application as had been submitted for me should have been considered. But the issue here was that the determination of the case actually changed the picture the case at the end of the whole exercise, the tribunal said, your status has changed. So you should now be treated as somebody who is now going to apply de novo. What it meant was that application had sent to the NCA 12 January 2018, which was for a renewal, is also in quotes void now because that pack is applying for something different from what the tribunal says you should do. So the parties here, as in the two companies, should have gone to the NCA with the new application form, starting de novo, and then pay whatever fees they had to pay.
The NCA has not raised the issue you are raising.
No, it's part of their stuff.
They have not raised the issue you are raising.
No, it's part of their judgment. This is what they are saying.
Wait.
They gave a chronology of events.
No, let's listen to them. They say the application was not processed due to the case filed.
Yes.
They did not say the application was a wrong application.
No. I am saying
you are saying it was a wrong application.
No. I'm not saying it was a wrong application. At the time they submitted the application, reading the judgment, it was the right application because the determination had not been made. But once the determination was made, it changed their status. It said that once you lose your authorization, you should be treated as somebody who is starting afresh. So now it is no more a renewal, it is a fresh application. The details of the two will always be different.
The prudent step to take is what? That I consider this applicant to be someone who has an application pending before me. Because this matter had not been determined, I didn't consider it.
Yes.
Now, how many days after they brought the complete process, a decision has come from the tribunal? Should I proceed on the application pending, or should I find time and ask them to do something else? Or I should just go and close them down? That's the question.
You should look at the application.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the judgment has said that now the application to the authority should not be in the form of a renewal. It should be in the form of a fresh application for that frequency.
That is the interpretation, which is correct. But the judgment, the decision did not say so.
No. You see,
no, it did not say so, but that's it's a correct interpretation. Yeah.
So now the NCA itself finds itself in a certain situation. You cannot process that application because technically speaking, it is the wrong application before you now.
Really?
Yes.
Kweku, I don't know what you think about the question I'm asking. 12th of January, they bring an application for a complete application. That's what NCA is saying. It's complete. All along, their problem was that what they were submitting was incomplete. But by the 12th of January 2018, they have submitted the complete application and paid the fees. And paid the fees for renewal. Then on the 18th of June 2018, the tribunal gave its decision. My question is, the way to treat it as an administrative body, is it to say, I'm coming to shut you down because of the decision, or I know that you have a renewal application pending before me. I rather want you to submit this kind of application, so I give you sufficient notice to do what you have to do. What's the best thing and the prudent thing to do? Shut down or say, I know you have something before me. Can you come and regularize it?
I will go for the second option.
Yes.
And
come and regularize it.
Yes.
That's what I will go for.
Okay.
And we should keep that. Of course, 32 stations were closed down last year. We haven't made too much noise about that. But there are certain stations that have a tradition. They are well branded. Radio Gold is one. And I would go for the second option. Even those that we've shut down, we should find ways and means of giving them the opportunity. Look, the media, radio, is critical for our socio-economic development. And I'm biased towards the media.
For good reason.
Yes. So, to be honest, I think that we should
Kweku, once again, these are basic regulatory compliance.
But that's why I said earlier that I'm prepared to take the risks of being accused of promoting impunity. I said so. It's a genuine feeling.
Okay.
I'm prepared to err on the side of the media.
All right.
Okay, so it's not impunity. You know, even lands commission, when people government lands, you see, your lease expires and all those people, they don't take the land away from you. You go and then you get a renewal. You see, you look at our mining laws, okay? The same. Nobody takes it away from you like that. Because as we stated earlier on, you've invested in it, so the brand.
More importantly, Radio Gold had now demonstrated good faith from what you read being an earlier posture of non-cooperation. So in this instance, in order to be seen not to be attacking press freedom, it is better to behave in a manner which is more rational, which would be the option of engaging them further.
Okay.
And then
Dr. Jansen disagrees and he wants to make a final point.
No,
Yeah.
it should be prudent and pragmatic.
See, Samson, I think we should also be fair to the NCA and the parties involved and ask certain questions. To start off with, if you look at the chronology of events, the apparent refusal of Radio Gold, for instance, to do what is needful boggles my mind. From the year 2000 till now, it transcends the reign of 5 presidents. First, 2000 was President Rawlings, then came President Kufuor, then came President Mills, President Mahama, and now President Nana Akufo-Addo is in office. Within the period, if you look at the chronology of events, NCA at different times and at different political regimes, 2009 was NDC. Even though they are pro-NDC, you realize that the NCA actually told them that, look, you are operating without authorization. If you look at the reign of Nana Akufo-Addo, the NCA has also told them the same thing. So what it means is that there's a fundamental problem which should not be politicized. 2, for you as an entity, you are a creature of law, a legal entity with all the rights that the law affords you. That includes the regulatory regime. The regulator keeps prompting you that, look, you are defaulting on these things. But for some reason, I don't know what happened, for a period of 19 years or 18 odd years, you don't seem to have taken the steps.
We have gone beyond that point.
No, I'm just surprised.
The question I'm now asking you, maybe finally, is this: when you follow the path of courts, even when you get a judgment, there are times that you compromise the judgment, correct?
Yes.
Do you think that when they got this, they should have done something before proceeding to close them down, or they should have gone ahead straight and closed them down, as we are told has happened now?
Okay, don't forget the judgment was in June 2018.
Yeah, the decision was in June.
And it's almost a year. Even though I don't work with the NCA, I'm sure 1 or 2 things may have happened. We made it to consult and ask for,
in January, they presented the complete renewal application.
No, I'm talking post.
And then in June,
yes,
the decision came.
Yes.
My question is, supposing you were the administrator of this entity, or you were the head of the communications ministry, what would have been your posture? To proceed to just shut down, or to reach out to them, in some form before?
Okay, if I were the regulator, what I would have done is this. First, I'll call them and let them understand that the ruling has been given by the tribunal. You cannot, in quote, profit from one part and leave the other part. You profited from one part, being you should not pay the fines. The other part that says that for you, you are considered as somebody without authorization and you should start afresh. I expect that you come in, you do it. For me, that should have been the posture. Okay. I don't know whether they did that within the boardroom.
In that case, you don't exactly disagree with the comments that
your colleagues
have
made.
But
ultimately, there is this principle that I think we should not lose sight of. We all keep talking about building strong institutions. And strong institutions are built on the strength of the law. There are legal provisions within the regulations and the act itself. And then the tribunal's own ruling, which now more or less binds the industry. You should all respect those provisions.
Okay.
That is the only way we can make the institution stronger.
Okay.
Else what will happen is that there will be anarchy, everybody gets up, and then we all do things anyhow. But ultimately, for me, the way forward, I think that the NCA, if I'm to advise them in a way, I will tell them that, look, they should give a final limited window of opportunity to all the radio stations or television stations, anybody caught in that web. And I think it should be very limited and it should be well published for everybody to see. Tell them that you either take advantage of this window and do the needful, or from that point onwards, you cease to operate. I'm saying this because Radio Gold, if you look at the circumstances, has operated for about 18, 19 years without the authorization. And in all this period, excuse me to say, we have all lived in the country, we have all survived. So if you give them a limited window of, say, a 2-week period or a month or whatever, I don't think that will be that fatal. But it will also go to, more or less, to a large extent, to deepen our, quest for press freedom and all that.
So briefly about XYZ, before we take a break, briefly about XYZ. XYZ is taking, solace in a section of the regulations. That's the regulation 107.3, which says that the authority shall communicate to the applicant its decision on the application for renewal within 60 days from the date of receipt of the application to renew. And if it fails to do so, the license shall be deemed to be automatically renewed for the period requested in the application. They set up in 2011, that's where they got their license. 2016, they were to renew, and it had expired. And then all of these happened. They are saying that on 28th of July, 2017, they wrote to the authority, and the authority acknowledged receipt of their renewal application. They are sought to renew. And the authority received the application for the FM authorization. Subsequently, the authority, pursuant to its regulatory powers, granted an amnesty, reprieve for deflating FM, I think they wanted to say defaulting FM stations, which had failed to follow strictly the timelines for renewal of FM authorizations, subject to a condition for the payment of penalties, which was declared by the tribunal to be unlawful. As the authority has failed or neglected since 18th June 2018, when the tribunal made its decision or complied with Section 16, 5, and 6 of the Electronic Communication Act 2008, it has been and still the view of XYZ Broadcasting that the authorization has been automatically renewed, and it is for that reason that XYZ Broadcasting continue to operate.
Well, I think that there's a problem here. You see, if you read the text and what the tribunal also said, and like I sought to bring that distinction clearly earlier, clearly the tribunal is now saying that the renewal processes are different from a fresh application.
Why do you accept and they go ahead to pay and you accept? Why do you do that?
But that was,
and when you do that, this provision, Regulation 107 should kick in.
No, but that
it
was
says
before.
If you
that
60
was,
days,
no, you see, that was before,
you don't communicate
that was
back
before
to them
the ruling
that you are rejecting it, then automatically the renewal takes place. So that's what they thought.
No, but that was before the ruling. Okay, that was before the ruling.
Okay.
My point is that the ruling has come in to more or less change the structure.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said earlier, we have to go back, give them an amnesty for them to come in and do it. But a quick one. I think that the entities involved and all media houses generally should also start being very responsible when it comes to some of these regulatory activities.
Correct.
In fact, I will suggest that if that 3-month period that is required of you to put in a notice is too short for some of them, maybe we should extend it to 6 months.
It's not short.
No,
you
I'm saying
have 5 years.
No. You see,
to prepare to file that thing.
We can say that 6 months before the end of your 5 years.
It won't change anything.
You should start engaging, such that we wouldn't have a situation where somebody will present his late, and then because of the numbers involved, it gets to a point you are supposed to operate without it. And I also think that following from what has happened and the ruling, the NCA itself should also look at the legal arrangement they work with, such that when you are being given a license, certain things should be stated clearly, including the fact that if you don't renew your license by the time, your authorization, by the end of the date the period that has been given you, automatically you lose it. It should become a condition attached to it, so that we will all be compelled to go in and put in our notices. Mind you, the Constitution says that we shouldn't really put impediments, generally speaking. It also tells us that the legal regime should be such that all other laws that will ensure public, safety, order, and all that are also attached.
Okay.
So just go.
But you are also aware of the principle you are taught in law in equity, that he who comes to equity must come with clean hands.
And that is why I have said to you.
And equity does not aid the slothing. If you go to sleep, equity has no time for you.
Exactly. That's exactly what we are saying.
The NCA slept, and the radio stations also slept.
You see, I'm not even too sure whether they slept. Because if you look at the chronology of events, there were times, like I said,
you're right.
They were communicating with
them of the expiry.
Maybe
I need to go for a break.
Some information just came in.
Right.
The NCA wrote its latest letter on 8th May 2019, hand-delivered it on 9th May 2019 in the company of armed police personnel in 3 vehicles and instructed the station to shut down within 5 minutes. This is a Gestapo way of closing down a radio station. And therefore, this is why we are saying that it's an attack on press freedom. Okay. Follow due process, even in what
press
you
freedom.
Do. Yes.
Are you not stretching this?
No. Once people cannot be heard, that's an attack on press freedom. And more importantly, maybe we should look at it. Don't trivialize the matter of I would not allocate to you 99.7 or 90.5.
Have they said so?
No, I'm just cautioning.
They just said that they reserve the right. They reserve the right to consider your license, your application. And
I'm saying, be
their
careful, tomorrow.
Their law says when you submit an application, they have a right to consider whether they will accept it and issue or they will not issue.
If you want to destroy multimedia brand, you can attack 99.7. We're just saying that don't give them that power. Because tomorrow, somebody will hide behind regulatory authority to destroy businesses. And something, the other fact is why they are struggling. Many of the FM stations, except those in Greater Accra, struggle to meet their basic cost.
I see.
And therefore, many of this, maybe even in the NCA Act, there's provision for a consumers forum.
Yeah, that's
we should encourage them to bring out a national stakeholder discussion on this matter.
Thank you very much. But somewhere in Section 3, getting to Section 16 of the Act, the Communications Act, it provides that the authority may grant or refuse an application for a license based on policies and rules published from time to time. So this kind of authority giving to them, you should not be saying that they do not have a right to decide whether they will give you your 90.5 anymore.
You see, something, I think the law is being very fair to everybody.
Okay.
It says there should be published regulations.
Great.
So what it means is that you do not be capricious in the decision to take or give out licenses.
Right. Bryce Simmons writes an article contributing to this debate, and his main position is that he says, my position on the matter is that, however, his position is fairly simple. The NCA should go to the civil courts to collect its overdue fees and any fines it has imposed, and should continue to impose on the corporate owners of the radio stations for failing to meet renewal deadlines and for broadcasting without a valid license. What they should avoid in the future is the use of force to physically prevent broadcasting. We'll take a break here.
I can assure you they can't pay.
They can't pay.
If you know the business.
Okay.
Yes,
and even the fines have been quashed.
All right. We'll take a break here. When we return, we'll read some of your messages on this matter for you and then proceed to ask whether the NDC's chairman, Akoto Ampaw, is being harassed by the CID or the political regime.